Hi everybody, hello, I hope you can all see me. Hello, welcome to this Goldsmiths lockdown lecture. My name is Sarah Wiseman and I'll be giving the lecture today on how we use and misuse emoji. Why does the pizza emoji slice mean I love you? Now, as you can see from my lecture slides, what we're going to be talking about today is emoji, specifically about how people use and misuse emoji and kind of what that means for emoji to be misused in the first place. Now, what I want to talk about is the idea of computer-mediated communication, and this is something that we are all doing a heck of a lot of right now, thanks to the current situation. Rather than seeing people face to face, we're using technology to talk to the people we love. We are using Zoom, we are using WhatsApp video, we are FaceTiming people, we are Snapchatting and TikToking, and the more things I say, the older I sound. But we are using computers to communicate with one another. Another form of computer-mediated communication is the humble text message, just sending a simple line of text to someone that they can read on a device. Now, I want to show you an example of how powerful emoji can be at changing the way that we send and we interpret these humble text messages. Now, without any emoji, if you received this text from a friend, the lockdown, oh yeah, I'm really enjoying it, you wouldn't really know what they meant necessarily. This is one of the issues with text, is that we get the pure content, but we don't get any of the information around it. Now, if that friend ended their message with an emoji, we might get a bit more information about what they intended. So, for instance, the friend who sent you that text message ends it with a smiling face like this. If the friend sends this, you know that actually they're probably having a pretty good time at lockdown. Maybe they have honed their sourdough bread, they've taken up knitting, maybe they've learnt 3 new languages and their Animal Crossing island is at 5 stars already. They're also pretty happy because they've discovered the Goldsmiths lockdown lectures, so they know that every Wednesday they can tune in at 2 p.m. and learn something new. This friend really is genuinely enjoying the lockdown. However, if that friend sent you that message with a slightly different emoji at the end, you might interpret it in a different way. Instead of the smiling face, if the friend had finished it with this emoji, for instance, we might realise, the friend is being a bit sarcastic about this. The lockdown, oh yeah, I'm really enjoying it. This friend is not having a good time. They wish they were outside, they wish they could go to the beach, they wish they could see their friends and family, but they can't. They are not having a good time. An emoji is a powerful thing to include in a text message. Now, emoji are something that are growing in popularity, and so much so that the Oxford English Dictionary, for their word of the year in the year 2015, chose an emoji as their word of the year. This was the first time they'd ever chosen something that was a pictogram and not a word. Now, I am going to ask you if you guys can guess what the emoji was. So, just to give you a couple of seconds to work out how you enter emoji on your keyboard, I will tell you that they chose an emoji because the word emoji had been increasing in popularity, increasing in use, to the extent that after a study they realised that the word emoji was being used 3 times more often in the year 2015 than it was in the previous year. The emoji that they chose for the word of the year was found to be used in 20% of all emoji-related communications in the UK, so that was quite a lot. I'm seeing a few guesses, some interesting ones that I'm not going to acknowledge right now. But the word of the year was, of course, smiling face with tears of joy. And I think you could probably maybe have guessed that one. It appears in all of my text messages, not that I'm sending, but people send me text messages, I see it all over Twitter. It's a very, very popular emoji. Now, let's look at exactly how popular emoji are. How often are we using them? In 2016, Facebook released some stats on how emoji were being used on their platform. They discovered that 60 million emoji were being used every single day. This is in 2016, remember. That is a pretty astonishing number. But, well, it's astonishingly small, really, when you think about it, because on Facebook Messenger, every day there were 5 billion emoji being sent. This is an incredible number. What an amount of emoji that we're using. As a more up-to-date example of how common emoji are at the moment, in a recent study from May, from this month, this year, it was discovered that 19% of tweets, that's nearly 1 in 5 tweets, contain an emoji. That's the word emoji behind my head there. We can see that emoji are incredibly popular, and they're hard to get away from. They're so hard to get away from that some people are kind of reacting badly to the emoji. Some people see the emoji as something that is childish, as immature, as unprofessional. And there are a lot of opinion pieces out there from people who think that emoji are dumb, quite frankly. Now, all of this information kind of comes together, and it makes someone who is a researcher think a bit. If we find something that is as powerful as an emoji at changing sentiment and what we mean, if we find something that is as prevalent as an emoji, we're using 60 million of them in Facebook just every single day. If we find something that is as contentious as emoji, some people love them, some people hate them, then as researchers, we get excited. And this is where I come in. I am a researcher and a lecturer at Goldsmiths University, and I work in the area of HCI. That stands for Human-Computer Interaction. And emoji are perfect. They fall right under this umbrella. Emoji help us humans use computers to interact with one another. And HCI is something that I teach at Goldsmiths University, and it's something that I conduct research on. And this is something that I'm going to talk to you about a bit today. So, forget all of the other researchers that are studying emoji. Just for the moment, I'm going to talk about me. Now, I want to tell you about exactly how I got interested in researching emoji and what got me excited about this area of work. I'm just going to tell you a little story, and I'm obviously going to use emoji to tell that story. So, many years ago, my friend was saving up to try and buy a house. She had been saving for a long time, and she had done so many things in her life to try and save this money. She had moved back in with her parents who won't thank me for representing them looking quite that old, and she had also given up avocado on toast. So you can understand, after having gone through all of this, that when I received the following text message, I was thrilled. She texted me, "It's finally happened, we exchanged on the house." She had finally purchased this house, something she'd been working so hard for so many years. I was absolutely thrilled for my friend. I was so excited for her. And so naturally, I sent back this. Now, my friend, upon receiving this, replied very confusedly. She wasn't sure exactly what I meant, and I think that a lot of you watching right now are probably equally confused about why I've chosen that seemingly random string of emoji to represent happiness and joy. Well, this is an emoji that I use with my sister. She is in the chat and she's probably filling it with carp streamers right now. And we use it when we're talking to each other to mean, "Oh my God, I'm really excited, that's brilliant, that's amazing." We use it to express real joy and real excitement. We have done the digital archaeology and we cannot work out why we did this, but anyway, it's something that me and my sister did. And as I was seeing this text from my friend, I was so excited for her, and so I instinctively used the emoji that I knew meant excitement and joy. Unfortunately, my friend didn't understand that this emoji had this secondary meaning and was therefore rightfully confused. And this is one of the problems with emoji, is that whilst they do have a meaning technically when they are drawn, anyone can use them to mean anything, and they can be interpreted in a whole host of different ways. It's not always clear what you mean when you're talking about an emoji or when you're sending one. So for example, you might have seen this emoji. This emoji is called woman tipping hand. Now, that might be what you use it for, but very commonly it's also used to mean woman flicking hair. Whilst that wasn't the intended use for this emoji, it has started to be used by people to mean woman flicking hair. So how does this ambiguity arise? How do we get to a place where we can have emoji that we don't really know exactly what they mean, or they can have unintended consequences? Well, I want to tell you a bit about where emoji come from. And I want to tell you about how we end up with new emoji. I'll only do this quickly, I promise. I've got a little link down there to a video that will explain this in a bit more detail. We get new emoji from a group called the Unicode Consortium. Every year they meet and they discuss proposals for new emoji. these proposals can come from people like you and I. They don't come from companies or from people who are professional emoji makers necessarily. You could recommend and suggest an emoji if you wanted to yourself. Once they get all of these proposals, they assess them and they base whether or not they will make it into the emoji library based on whether or not they meet a series of criteria. I'll just tell you about a few of those criteria now. One of them is that if this was to be made into an emoji, would it be visible and would you be able to decipher it if it was made really small? Because obviously emoji are very commonly a very small pictogram in text. If it meets that criteria, then they'll check another thing. Is this new emoji that's being proposed, is it unique, or does it repeat some concept that is already possible to convey with emoji? So, for example, if you were to try and suggest to the Unicode Consortium that we need another emoji for baby chicken or chick, they would probably look at the emoji and say, no, that's repeating something we've already got. We do have a lot of options to represent chicks in emoji. The final the final category I want to highlight to you, whilst there are a few more, is the Unicode Consortium want to know that this new emoji will be something that is useful to people, that people are desperate for, that people really, really want. And personally, for me, I have been desperate for a lot of my emoji using life to be able to express the concept of dinosaur. That was sorely missing until 2017, when finally we got a sauropod and a T-Rex. Finally, we can all talk about dinosaurs in emoji. I know we're all excited about that. So, once the Unicode Consortium are happy that an emoji meets all of these requirements, it will make it into the emoji library. At this point, the Unicode Consortium will give the emoji a name, and they'll give an example image of what it could look like. This is an example image, because the next step is that the Emoji Consortium release the new emoji to all of the vendors who will be responsible for having a digitally rendered version of that emoji, and then the designers in-house will decide what that emoji looks like. So the people at Apple designing emoji for iOS will have a go at designing a new emoji. The people at Google designing for the new Android release, they will have a go at designing a new emoji, same as Twitter, same as Facebook. I think YouTube even has has its own set of emoji. And for that reason, we have this slight issue with how we communicate using emoji, and that is that the emoji that we see when we are writing a message or posting something is not necessarily going to look the same as it did when we write it as when someone reads it. Let me show you a few examples of that. So this is a fairly classic example from 2014. If in 2014 you owned an iOS, an Apple device, and you wanted to send your friend a lovely yellow heart, maybe you just want to express lovely friendship to them, or I don't know what you would use a yellow heart for, but you've specifically chosen a yellow heart to send to your friend. If you sent this to if you tweeted it, it would look a little bit different. It would look kind of a little flatter, but it would still look yellow. The Unicode description of this is yellow heart, and this is the example image that Unicode provide. Now, if you texted that friend from your iOS device and you texted a friend that had an Android device, this lovely yellow heart, this is what your friend on Android would see. It's fairly inexplicable. It's certainly not a yellow heart, though, that's for sure. There is some speculation that maybe what happened was that the designers making this emoji looked at the Unicode example, saw all of those dots, which I suppose are meant to indicate colour, and thought, that means hair. And so the on I think it was Android 4.4, if you received a yellow heart from a friend, it would look like this, probably very different to what your friend intended you to see. Luckily, Google rectified this, so you are no longer suffering from that type of miscommunication across OSs. Now, this is something that's been studied. Whilst in this example it's kind of funny, in other instances it can actually be quite problematic. So, let's have a look at this. This is the grinning face with closed eyes. I think that's what it's called. And in 2016, this is how it rendered on two different OSs. This is how it rendered on Android and how it rendered on Apple. Now, the two kind of give off a different vibe, don't they? So some researchers in 2016 decided to explore this. They showed various different emoji rendered in the Android set and rendered in the Apple set, and asked people, what emotions do you think these are showing? What do you think they're expressing? And this one had a very diverse range of opinions. Some people, when they saw the Android version of this, thought it meant blissfully happy. When people saw the Apple version of the exact same emotion, they thought it meant ready for a fight. And this is quite problematic when it comes to expressing yourselves. We saw how important emoji were right at the beginning for adding sentiment and adding emotion to a text message. When the emoji is going to render completely differently on a friend's phone, that might be problematic. It's so problematic, in fact, that on Emojipedia it comes with a warning label. Appearance differs greatly cross-platforms. Use with caution. Why would you want to use it with caution? Well, you can really change the sentiment of a text message if you use this one badly. Imagine you get a text from a friend. They say, just went on that date, and you get that lovely smiling emoji. You think, oh, brilliant, they've had a great time on that date. Whereas if you have an Apple device, that looks like this. Just went on that date. Oh gosh, they've had a really bad time on that date. So whereas the user has tried to use emoji to add more meaning and more sentiment to their text, because of this different OS issue, the emoji has actually added to the confusion rather than clearing things up. So this is one issue with emoji and the ambiguity of understanding them, that different OSs, different platforms represent them looking ever so slightly different from one another, and that can change the meaning. So that addresses the different platform issue, but there are even issues when you see the same emoji. So for example, some other researchers in 2016, they wanted to see if people could understand the sentiment, the feelings and the emotion of emoji from just the very same emoji, not comparing them across platforms, just looking at the very same one. What they did was they asked people to look at an emoji and then rate it on two different scales. One scale is whether or not they thought the emoji was positive or negative, okay? The other scale they wanted to rate it was whether or not it was high or low energy. That just means how much of that emotion were they feeling. So just to help you understand the energy scale, for example, a negative emotion that is low energy would just be sad, just a bit sad. A negative emotion that was high energy would be wailing, crying, screaming, some very serious negative emotion. So they asked users to rate various emoji on this scale. And as before, there were some very differing results. So here we're just looking at the same OS. They just showed people this emoji from the Apple OS. And people interpreted it in wildly different ways. You can see some people saw it as high energy and a positive emotion. The emoji just does sit in the emoji keyboard with a few smiley faces, so maybe it is intended to be positive. But there are plenty of people who believe that it has a negative connotation. Maybe people see that drop of water and they see it as sweat, they see it as stress. Some people think it has high energy, some people has low energy. This is just another problem with I'm not sure if I want to say problem. Another thing to note about the ambiguity of emoji. Even within the same OS, we can have confusing interpretations of the same emoji. So, to conclude that section, emojis are really ambiguous. And I corrected myself earlier, I said problem and I didn't mean problem, I meant thing to note. That's because this ambiguity is actually something that some people are really using to their advantage. I'm going to ask you now, does anyone know which emoji I'm talking about? If I'm talking about 1F351, I'm being silly. I don't think any of you do, but there's a chance you might be able to guess what I'm about to talk about. I'm going to talk about an emoji that has a very clear and distinct meaning, but is more often than not used for that meaning. And that is this emoji. This is, according to the Unicode Consortium, a peach emoji, okay? But sometimes it's not necessarily used to mean peach. In fact, it has such a common secondary meaning that some people in 2016, again, did a study to find out whether or not people were using this to mean peach or not. What they did was that they collected a whole host of tweets that included the peach emoji, and they assessed what the meaning was when the emoji was included. In those tweets, 7% of the time, people were talking about a peach. Great, sensible. That's not a very high percentage though. 33% of the time, people were talking about butts. Okay, I'm not going to mess around here. People use this emoji to mean buttocks because the way it's rendered, it kind of looks like that. And this is a really, really common reuse or misuse of the peach emoji. And it is so prevalent that in 2016, when Apple suggested that they were going to redraw their peach emoji, everyone was furious with them. The website Mashable claimed that Apple just ruined sexting because they had taken the peach emoji that they had in iOS 10, which looked very much like a buttocks, and they had changed it ever so slightly to look less like that. There was such uproar, such aggravation and upset from all of the users that Apple heard what the users were saying, and in the final release of the new iOS, the peach had returned to normal. The peach could still be used to not mean peach. So this is one example of how users kind of on a more vast scale can take an emoji with one specific meaning and kind of change it a bit and give it this secondary meaning. Now, that doesn't really clarify or kind of, it doesn't look at what happened when me and my sister made up our own emoji meaning, right? Because that peach emoji is understood by a lot of people. A lot of people understand that that has a secondary meaning. But the problem that I faced when I texted my friend was that not a lot of people understand this secondary meaning for the carp streamers emoji. Not a lot of people understand it means excitement or joy, because that's something that me and my sister have invented. And this got me thinking, are me and my sister weird? Or do other people do this too? Well, this starts my research investigation into emoji. And I'm going to ask you now if you have any emoji that you use with just one or maybe two other people that only you two know the meaning of. You don't need to share it if you don't want to, but it would be kind of interesting if you want to. Just drop it in the chat. You don't need to tell everyone what it means. You can keep that a secret if you want. But I'll be intrigued to know if there are any people out there who are doing this, who have an emoji that has a secondary meaning with just one other person. I will spoil it. It isn't just me and my sister who do this. I conducted, along with a colleague, a research study to investigate whether or not other people were doing this, whether or not there were people out there who had a secondary meaning for an emoji. And the way we did this was that we released a web survey, and we asked people a few short questions about whether or not they had an emoji and what it meant and why they chose it. And I'm just going to go through some of the really what I consider fascinating results from that survey. And at the end, I'm going to talk to you about why this is important and why we need to consider this this possibility of secondary meanings for emoji. So let's get to it. We sent out this survey. We got results from 71 people. So please bear in mind this is a relatively small study, small scale study. There are studies out there with emoji that will use thousands and hundreds of thousands of examples. But this one, more qualitative, is quite small scale for now. So let's see what we got. 71 people responded. How did they respond? Well, I can tell you that of the emoji that people were repurposing to have a secondary meaning, the most common group that people were repurposing was the animals and nature. 41% of the emojis that people had a secondary meaning for were from this category. Second was the smiley faces, and third was food. I can tell you that nobody repurposed anything from the flags category. I think that would be very, very impressive if you were able to, because they all have fairly set meanings, but we didn't find anyone who had repurposed a flag emoji to mean anything else. When people were using these emoji, they were most commonly using them with their romantic partner. In fact, almost half of respondents said that they had an emoji that had a special meaning they used just with their romantic partner. In a minute, we'll have a look at one possibility for why that is, but I'm sure that there are many more. Now, let's look at some of the most common emoji we got. The most commonly repurposed emoji, that is the emoji that most people said that they had a secondary meaning for, was this, the lovely octopus. Some people used it to mean hugging and just general kind of closeness, which is maybe creepy, I don't know, I shouldn't be judging. But that was the most commonly reported emoji that people who answered our survey said they had reused to mean something else. I'm going to ask you now, does anyone here use a emoji as a pet name for someone? So this is, the phrase pet name means kind of like affectionate term, nickname, or something like that. Well, a lot of people in our survey reported using emoji as pet names for people. So they would use a specific emoji when they wanted to talk about someone or talk to someone specifically. I can tell you the most commonly used emoji for pet names, in our study at least, was the penguin. So if you are using the penguin to use a pet name for your partner, then bear in mind that it's not necessarily that original. But if it means something to you, then who cares? So why were people repurposing emoji? What purpose did people have for these repurposed emoji? A lot of people responded that they used emoji to mean excitement. In this instance, I guess this might replace 100 exclamation marks at the end of a message. It might be a quicker way of saying, oh my word, wow, amazing. A lot of people reported having a single emoji to express that. You'll see that my own data is in there, the carp streamers is right at the top. I don't actually believe my sister filled in this survey despite me asking her to, so that's my own data point that I'm sharing with you there. Why else did people use it? Some people reported using emoji because they wanted to covertly be able to send kind of sexy messages to people. So the top one here is a goat. Goats have horns, horny. The second one is a horrible ogre face. This person reported using the ogre face because it is on purpose as unsexy and as an emoji as they could find. So they used it kind of ironically to let their partner know that they were in an amorous mood, let's say. Other people used emoji because of the way they looked. Now this one's a really interesting category, and this is specifically related to how the particular platform has chosen to represent that emoji. So for example, one person reported using the bathtub because at the time there was no coffin emoji, and they wanted to talk about particularly gothic things, for example, and so there was no coffin emoji, and so they decided to use the bathtub. Why? Because it kind of looks like someone lying down in a coffin, I guess. If you haven't got anything else to work with, this is the best option, an emoji. The second one here, this was reported by people when they wanted to discuss or say the word lesbian, because in US Sign Language, this is the sign for lesbian. And so this thinking face emoji happens to be good for using the word lesbian. Now, it's not that thinking and the word lesbian have any necessary link between them for emoji purposes. It just so happens that the way it's been drawn here by Apple has that affordance. It can be used in that way, which is really a creative use of emoji if you think about it. Some people used an emoji because it was a direct link to a shared event in history. Maybe they remember that the time they saw that rainbow together, or the time that they went camping together in the forest, or who knows why. But some people just needed a single representation of one object from a lovely shared memory together, and that meant I'm thinking of you, or I have this, or remember that time when, or you're important to me. It can mean a whole host of things, but the reason that it's used is because they have a shared history in the real world. Some people used emoji as shorthand for specific things that they share knowledge about, that they share experiences about. This person, for example, wanted to talk about their local pub, and they had an emoji shorthand that probably no one else would understand, because their local pub was called the Hatchet. I'll leave that to you to work out why. A lot of people reported emoji usage when they wanted to say I love you to people. Now this was really fascinating, because a lot of people decided that expressly saying I love you was maybe sometimes a little bit difficult. Sometimes it's a bit awkward to tell someone that. Sometimes it's a bit difficult, or it feels just a bit kind of unsubtle to do that. And so lots of people reported using emoji to let their partner know that they loved them. Some people used emoji because they were just quite frankly silly. So this is what the person who uses the horse reported. But others, and they were not alone, reported that they said I love you by expressing in emoji form the type of food that they and their partner love most of all. So if you and your partner love pizza, then these people reported using pizza to mean I love you. Others reported cheese to mean I love you. I would probably use chocolate if I was going to be doing this. But this was a really interesting way of people kind of avoiding saying things in text just so that they could use an emoji and maybe perhaps be a bit more subtle, I suppose. Now we get on to my absolute favourite, and I think most illustrative of why emoji are important category. These were people who had repurposed an emoji purely to make a connection with someone. When we are face to face with someone, we are not just talking, we're not just using our words, we are using our body language. Sometimes we're not saying anything at all. Sometimes we just want to touch someone. Sometimes just an arm on a shoulder means something. Sometimes a hug means something and you don't want to say any words. How do you do that when all you have is words? How do you do that when you just have a text message? How do you express this sort of subtle, content-free message to someone? How do you say, I just want you to know I'm thinking of you? Well, these people had specifically chosen emoji to express that to someone that they loved. Sending a bear says a lot without having to find the words. And my favourite one, someone said they just used the balloon to say I'm thinking of you because sometimes talking is hard. And I think this is really illustrative of why emoji are so beautiful and why they aren't immature and why they aren't childish. Because a text message is such a stripped down version of communication between two people. It's such a bland and purely information driven way of communicating. Adding emoji or using emoji instead can be more evocative, and it can just be more subtle and poetic, and it can add that texture to a text communication that is lost when we do it through a computer rather than face to face. Emoji can add those tone of voice, it can add that sense of affection, it can add that facial expression, it can add that sense of touch. Emoji can make our text communications, it can elevate them so that they are closer to the types of communications that we have when we're face to face. And more than ever, this is important. I'm just going to leave you with one key thought about why this is important, not just from this kind of emotional connection level, but from a more a higher level, from thinking about what does this mean for the way that we analyse and the way that we interpret emoji on a grander scale. This matters because humans don't understand emoji usage yet. Okay? When we look at the same emoji, we might interpret it in completely different ways. You might think it's very positive, I might think it's very negative. There is a whole range of ways that humans might interpret emoji, despite the fact that the Unicode Consortium have given it a nice little label. That doesn't necessarily mean that that's how everyone is going to read it. So this is really important because sometimes, particularly in AI, for example, we are teaching machines to understand sentiment based on the emoji that they see that humans have used. We are teaching machines to trawl Twitter and determine whether people are talking in positive or negative ways based on the language they used, but also based on the emoji they use. And that may not be a very sensible thing to do because that's acting and assuming that all emoji have a single purpose and a single meaning, when really they don't. Sentiment analysis of emojis is not straightforward because sometimes pizza means pizza, but sometimes pizza means I love you. Okay, that's me. That's the end of the lecture for now. Thank you so much for listening, and I could see the chat going wild. I love it. It's just full of emoji. If you have any questions for me now, I'm really happy to answer them. Also, if you want to read that paper, it's available at that link there. And if you have any ideas for emoji research, things you want to find out, things you want to know, then please feel free to get in contact with me. I'm also really happy to answer some questions from you over email about studying at Goldsmiths, if you have any questions about that, because Goldsmiths is the place where I teach, and Goldsmiths is the place that let me do this type of research. So I really would love it if you could come here. Thank you very much. I'm going to look at the comments now to see if you have any questions. Oh, I love how many emoji there are in there. Would there be any more live chats? There are going to be some more live chats. Thank you very much for prompting me. I have to say that. Next week, my colleague Fede Fachet is going to be talking about Animal Crossing. He is a lecturer in and program leader of our independent games and playable experience design masters. So he'll be coming to talk about Animal Crossing and games more widely. I'm sure a lot of you have been playing a lot of Animal Crossing right now. I know I have. What other fields are you exploring? Well, within emoji in particular, I am working with a few master's students, I'm not sure if they're in the comments, to look at how age and age can affect the way that this sort of interpretation and understanding of emoji, how that can have an effect on what type of emotion people interpret emoji to have, and also looking at whether or not this varies across countries. There's some really interesting research to show that there are very clear patterns in the types of emoji you use depending on the country you're from. And so we're interested to know whether or not this type of repurposing might be different depending on the country that you're from. That's just my own personal emoji related research. There is a whole host of stuff going on out there if you're interested in finding out a bit more about things. I briefly talked about a few papers here, but there are lots of other amazing emoji work going on out there. Just to continue to talk about myself quickly, I also research medical device design, and I research immersive theatre, which is not going on at the moment, but it's a version of theatre where you aren't sat down in seats, but you are wandering around the action, wandering around scenes and actors, so I'm researching in a lot of different areas, but emoji happens to be one that I'm particularly excited by at the moment. Cool, thank you. Oh, emoji to avoid surveillance. That's a fantastic question. Thank you very much. I haven't myself been we haven't got a specific aim to do that, but that was one of the things that I didn't speak about in the lecture today. From our data set that we collected, we found some people reporting using different emoji to avoid surveillance on various text channels. So for example, some people would use the bugle horn emoji when they were talking about drugs because they didn't want, they were trying to evade the text analysis so that they could and using emoji to do so. So avoiding surveillance is a really, really interesting topic of study. I think that's a really good question. Thank you. Yeah, and talking about the coronavirus, I think there's a lot of interesting different ways that people are representing coronavirus in emoji. Interesting questions about how people would use emoji in live stream chat. Yes, the question about so there's a question here about whether or not so someone has found in their research that emoji use is heavily dependent on subcommittees based on streams. This is something that I am actually interested in as well, whether or not there are community-based emoji behaviours and patterns. So a colleague of mine has noted that, for example, in Slack, depending on the different channel that you're in, there'll be different expectations of what emoji you use when you're expressing something to someone. So for example, in one chat it might be very common to use 5 different emoji at a time, but in another there might just be 3 emoji that they use, and you use this one, or you use this one, or you use this one. And there are definitely patterns in the different like subgroups, sub-communities of people. So I think that probably links to the work you're doing in Twitch. Charlie, if you want to get in touch with me, please do. Yes, custom emotes as well, yeah. So I haven't talked about custom emoji or stickers or memes or GIFs in this. These are all similarly used in kind of text-based communication to go beyond words. But these are things that are not controlled across all devices. So the Unicode Consortium ensures that all devices, allows all devices to have the same subset of pictographs, which are emoji, and that's why they're particularly interesting to study, because technically everyone who has a phone that has an emoji keyboard has access to the same range of pictograms, whereas things like stickers and custom emotes and things like that, they allow people to go far beyond that, and actually often have a bit more control over what they share with people. The problem with these custom emotes and stickers and whatnot is that they aren't as like cross-platform, they're not as possible on different platforms because there is no form of standard, unlike Unicode, where you can you can ensure that you're able to share the same base emoji on Twitter, on Facebook, on your text message, yada yada yada. You couldn't do that at the moment with custom emotes. Right, questions about my PhD research topic. It's like I've planted you in the chat so that I can talk about other things. Thank you very much. My PhD topic was nothing to do with emoji. This was emoji was an area of human-computer interaction that I hadn't considered before, having my own personal experience there with that story with using carp streamers. My PhD research, however, was on the way that we enter numbers, and there's a whole lot of research out there looking at how we enter alphabetical text, and as a result of that we have wonderful virtual keyboards on our touchscreen telephones that are able to work out and guess exactly what we're intending to say. These things have been designed really nicely for alphabetic entry, but the same attention to detail has not necessarily been given to entering numbers. You might think entering numbers is a very niche thing that doesn't happen very often, so maybe we don't need to pay much attention to it. However, numbers are very prevalent in a lot of critical domains. So think about it. If you make an error when you type a number and you are transferring money to someone else's bank, if you make an error you might accidentally send money to someone entirely different, and that happens quite frequently here in the UK. Numbers are also used in hospitals, for example, when determining how much of a drug a patient should be receiving, how quickly, how fast, how much. And if an error is made there, then patients unfortunately can get seriously harmed or can even die. And so it's really important for us to understand how humans read numbers and how they enter them into devices and how those devices are designed. I tell you what, I have another lockdown lecture in me, so I'll be quiet about that for now, but maybe I'll do another one if they let me in a few weeks' time. Is there a website where we can check out what emoji will look like per platform? Brilliant question, Charlotte. There is. The website Emojipedia is doing exactly that. The website Emojipedia has a page for every single emoji, and it will show you, it will tell you the name, and it will show you what that emoji looks like on every single, well, not every single platform, but on a whole range of platforms. It will highlight the emoji that are rendered very differently on different platforms, just to give you a warning for it. And Emojipedia also do a lot of really brilliant research. I cited 2 pieces of their research in this talk today. They did the peach emoji research, and they did the research looking at how many emoji, the prevalence of emoji on Twitter, and they do a lot of really interesting research. So if you're interested in emoji, I recommend going to the website and maybe following them on Twitter, because they do a lot of really good stuff. So questions about whether or not emoji, whether there's research into the emoji that are chosen and developed reflects the culture and biases of the companies creating them? Great question. This is one of the things that, so the Unicode Consortium are, I think they're a not-for-profit consortium of people who decide upon which emojis get through, basically. And you'll note one of the key changes that emoji is going through at the moment is that it's becoming more globalized, I suppose. So whereas before there was no emoji with a hijab, there is now an emoji with a hijab. There are emoji for prosthetic limbs now. There are emoji for food, food items that before were not represented because initially I believe the emoji originated in Japan, so a lot of the food options in emoji are from that culture, and now emoji is kind of starting to globalize and starting hopefully to represent more people and to become more and more useful to more people. So initially, yes, emoji really represented the people that made emoji, and it represented the people who decided on which emoji get through. There is, I won't really comment further, but I know that there are people who are kind of not thrilled that there is just this one group of people that get to decide which emoji we use, because maybe they aren't as diverse or representative of the world's population. So maybe they aren't making the decisions for the world, which is an interesting thing to consider. Okay, I think I've kept you here for long enough. So this lecture is going to be up, available for you to watch anytime, available for you to show your friends anytime. And as I said, next week, same time, Wednesday at 2 p.m, do come along and see my colleague Fede talking to you about the importance of games and Animal Crossing in particular. Thank you so much for being engaged, and do get in contact with me if you have any questions about emoji, studying here at Goldsmiths, or anything else related. Thanks everyone. Have a good rest of your day. Bye bye.